Welcome to BlueRainGallery podcast. Today we're honored to have a visit by Bryce Pettit, a renowned sculptor who's been in our stable for a couple of years now. And welcome, Bryce.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming from Durango.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Beautiful country, beautiful country. Well, we always start this off because we want our audience to kind of know where you're from and how you got started into art. And maybe you can start with that. Where were you born and where were you raised?
I grew up on kind of northern Utah, southern Idaho, kind of in that region, back and forth a little bit, all very rural agricultural communities. And I feel like it was a very magical childhood growing up in the mountains, and I just had free reign to explore, and which is very influential for me.
So you get close to the Tetons over there, and
I had a lot of family that was in Idaho Falls, and so Yellowstone Park and Jackson and that whole general area really felt like our backyard. Some of my earliest memories in life are going and playing around in that area.
So your parents take you hiking and camping, or
yeah, we did a lot of that. Yeah. We did a lot of hiking and camping, and then even more formative for me was just by the time I was about 12 years old, I was just on my own exploring. And now as a father, I have a hard time imagining letting my kids have that same sort of carefree freedom. The yard was where I wiped my feet, and as long as I was home for dinner, it didn't matter. I was just out exploring.
Yeah, it's different when you're out there versus your kids, for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
I was sitting at a restaurant the other day at a bar, and this guy sat next to us, and I was telling him, yeah, me and my wife, we like going up this certain hiking trail, and he goes, well, if you knew how many mountain lions are out there, right, you wouldn't even bother.
Right.
So it can get kind of scary, but yeah, wildlife is around us all the time. I suppose this is what inspired you eventually to get into art?
Yeah, I've always loved being out in the wilds and just exploring. Animals are very important for me. I actually did grad studies as an aquatic ecologist. So
wow.
Before I've done art and I've loved to make things. I've always worked with my hands ever since I can remember. I just love to make things, and but I never grew up with the intention of being an artist. I've always been an artist, but that wasn't like an accepted career choice in the environment that I grew up in. So
I think that's kind of common. Sometimes parents are like, "Oh, you need to become a lawyer or a doctor."
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you're going to have a hard life. You become artist.
Yeah,
because the struggle is real.
That's right. I started out. My first semester of college was in pre-med, and that took one semester. I was like, "No, this is not what I do."
So, did you get a degree finally? Is that what you said?
I did a master's program in ecology.
And explain that.
Well, so I did a bachelor's degree in general biology, and then a master's program with like the study of streams and the fish and all the ecosystem there with the bugs and the birds and everything that goes into it. And then I got accepted to the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and I was going to do a PhD. But between that master's program and the PhD, when I was supposed to start, I had a summer off, and I had always been doing my art. There'd never been a time when I haven't been creating art. And that summer, I'm like, it'd be really fun to start developing this a little bit more. So that summer, I loaded up my little Mazda pickup and started driving around all my creations, and got so enamored with this. It felt like a revelation to me that there were people that were doing that for a living. And that was it. I never went back.
Well, sometimes it takes a jump. Close your eyes and go for it. And, it seems maybe a little bit of your studies have helped you along the way.
Yeah.
Noticing the whole ecosystem of how bugs and animals and all this goes around. It's pretty cool. What was one of the first sculptures you made?
First sculptures probably were fish.
Mm-hmm.
I did some wood carvings initially, and I tried some stone carving. And like I said, I've always just loved to make things. I grew up painting and drawing, but animals have always been a big inspiration for me.
So when did you get into clay?
I think for me, the way I think of it is any sculptor eventually ends up playing around with clay because it gives you the ultimate freedom. Like when I did wood carvings, you're very limited by the material. You have to be conscious of the grain and how it's, supported and the strength and all that. And the same for stone carving. You have to plan it out and look at the rock and see
look at the fissures and
and work with that. And I think, at least for myself, and I think a lot of sculptors are the same, that you eventually get frustrated by the limitations of the material and you gravitate towards clay because you have as much, the only limiting factor is gravity. You know, you can have this whole big bird attached by a tip of its wing, and so you get a lot of freedom.
Yeah, the oil base for sure lets you have liberation. But I do like harder clay sometimes because you can keep edges. I find keeping edges with oil-based clay is really hard.
It is, yeah. And I've experimented with some waxes. Some of my more finely detailed pieces I'll actually sculpt in wax instead of clay because you do get slightly more detail. And you can keep those crisp edges. I know what you're talking about, yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about where did you develop the idea to put sculpture on the wall?
So it's kind of a transition from what I was just saying. Like you are always seeking for more freedom of expression. So I leave stone and wood carving, go to bronze, and as I said, you're only limited by gravity. And eventually, for myself, I was like, I want to do something that's not having to sit on the ground, that's not attached. And so, what's the most simple way to create a concept is just the form itself, just the bird, and the next step was to attach it to the wall.
Yeah, the one of the coolest things was the first time you did a display for us and with the birds and the butterflies, and it's like, wow, why hasn't anybody thought about this before? Talk about innovation versus imitation. That was an innovative move, and
well, thank you.
Yeah, that takes not only creativity of the piece, but the vision of how to display it properly, where people can appreciate it.
The other thing I really like about it is that the whole space becomes part of the artwork. It's no longer, when it's setting on a pedestal, it is contained within itself and to some degree. But when it's part of the room, when it's on the wall, the whole space becomes interactive. Yeah,
a lot of people like it as filler spaces because, think about a staircase. Mm-hmm. It's how do you decorate a staircase?
Exactly.
And it is a perfect thing. If it's round. If it's a rounded staircase
yes.
or whatever, it works great with the birds as well, and really popular. What are your hobbies these days?
I still spend a lot of time out of the doors.
That's what I figured.
Yeah, I just love it. I mean, that's where I really connect and find my inspiration and all that kind of
stuff.
When
you're out in the outdoors, do you have a camera with you and stuff? Are you looking for wildlife, or are you just trying to visually remember when you get back to the studio from stuff you're looking at?
I used to do a lot of photography and try to get into that. I've never been a great photographer, but I think for me, what's become more important is to capture the feeling. I know that sounds really fuzzy, but is remembering how it made you feel and then trying to recreate that. For as far as like sculpting an animal, you can study the anatomy, you can study how they go together, and as long as you understand that, you can create the animal itself, but the position and the motion within that sculpture has to come from the feeling, which is not something you can get from even 10 photographs, or 100 photographs.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the audience can see the eagle behind Bryce over here, but where did you come up with the composition of the eagle like that? Was that off a photograph, or was it just a memory?
So that one was more trying to create a feeling of like trying to create an emotion. So I wanted to create this feeling of like struggle and breaking free, power, but some restraint and like emergence to it. So I chose an eagle as the medium to tell that story. Mm-hmm. Once you get the anatomy of the eagle, then I start to move the wings around and move the position of the body and everything until it feels like I want it to, like the emotion I was going for.
Thank goodness for oil-based clay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
because it allows you to do that, right?
Yes.
And I noticed that about the bear as well on our desk. You're capturing emotion in the animal, and that's well. If you're going to be a sculptor, find a way to be different and to try to capture something that nobody else is capturing, and capturing a feeling or putting that into an object is hard.
Yeah.
A lot of people can't. They might be able to make a perfect bear, but a bear doing something or having that passion or motion in it is hard to do.
Yeah. So I like to say I know a lot of animal sculptors are creating models of animals. To me, that it rises to to the level of art when it's not just a model of something, but you're using the animal to tell or create an emotion, tell a story.
That leads me to another question. And who do you look up to in the sculptural world?
There's a bunch. I mean, there's so many really talented sculptors out there. Going back to my childhood growing up and going to Jackson a lot, that was a very big of inspiration. So alongside the time in nature for me was in the evenings we'd go walk around in the gallery. So those are very closely linked for me, seeing the artists that are up there, and the National Museum of Wildlife up there, artists up there with the some of the best wildlife sculptures and paintings that exist. And there's a number of guys that I follow up there, a kind of long list of maybe too many to name, but
well, another part of sculpting, it's one thing to create the piece, and then you get it cast.
Yeah.
And this is probably all lost wax process.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's put together, metal worked, chased as they call it.
Yeah.
And then we deal with patinas.
Yeah.
Right. And where did you get your idea or sense of color palette for these? For your average, I noticed they're not full of tons of color. They're kind of muted.
Yeah.
And is that on purpose? Is that something that...
Well, it depends a little bit on the piece. I know that a lot of sculptors really narrow down to a single patina they like to use. I prefer to have the piece and the emotion really dictate the patina that goes into it. Some of them are more suited to kind of a organic, more loose patinas, such as on the eagle and on the bear here. And some of them specifically call for something that is more depictive of the piece. Like in the background, we have the monarchs up on the wall. A monarch that's not orange and black doesn't really look like a monarch, and so it's not telling that story.
Right.
And then I, as you're saying with the casting process, it really is a group effort.
It's a team.
It's a team.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have great metal workers and great foundries. I work with 4 different foundries, a couple different metal workers, and then I do my patinas with Nathan Bennett, who's also an artist, a very accomplished artist in his own right. So a lot of times the discussion for patina is a real open discussion where we talk about what we're trying to do, and not to keep coming back to it, but I will often talk about what are we trying to make you feel with this piece, and then we'll adapt the patina to it instead of saying, put this chemical here, this goes there. It develops on its own with the piece.
Yeah. I also noticed you've been working with stainless steel.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what do you like about that versus, say, the patina process on bronze?
Well,
because it's kind of a patina in a way.
It is,
right?
Yeah. It's a different finish, and you can cast the same piece in stainless steel, and it feels completely different. You have this bright, shiny, a much more modern feel to it, even the same form. It's amazing to me how different it is just based on the metal.
Yeah, sometimes the patinas could give that real warm feeling,
yes.
And then the steel is a little more cold.
Yeah.
Right.
And I guess that's why I started playing around with stainless steel to begin with, is because it created, with bronzes, you are mostly dealing with the warm palette. So if you want something that's in the cooler side of colors, you have to go to stainless.
So is it harder for a foundry to cast in stainless steel than it is bronze? Is the shrinkage rate on
the shrinkage rate is similar. It is harder. Most art foundries are not equipped to do stainless steel. They farm it out. I have a foundry that I work with. They require special furnaces. They have to use an induction furnace instead of a forced gas furnace, because the melting temperature is twice what bronze is.
Yeah. I thought it would be a little bit more difficult to produce that.
Yeah, it is.
Interesting.
But if you have the right furnaces, there's not anything terribly different about the casting process. It's just getting the metal hot enough.
Yeah. As far as your career goes, where do you want to take this? What's the future bring in for you?
It's always changing. I feel like I'm in a phase right now where I'm wanting to tell more stories with the pieces. And when I put together a show, I'm trying to not just create, I'm trying to create a cohesive show that has a story that unifies all the pieces in that. One that I'm working on that'll be coming up in May for here at Blue Rain is kind of loosely titled about what the animals have taught me, like different life lessons or different things that are part of my personality and that are important to me, represented through different animals.
What is your relationship with the gallery? Why are you in a gallery versus not being in a gallery?
There's a bunch of different answers to that question. When I first started out in my artwork, like I said, I just loaded up my little Mazda pickup and I just drove around and showed it to whoever I could. But I really feel like you're limited in what you can do with that. I can't be everywhere at once. I can't, I have a hard enough time keeping up with creating the art. And so the reason that I feel like the gallery is very important is because they're able to show you to the right people. They're kind of able to curate and direct your career in a way that gets to more exposure, gets to more presentation. It's really a matter of synergy. There's things that I could just never do trying to represent myself.
Yeah, I've noticed a pretty good relationship with you and BlueRainGallery, and every year you've been here, we've been growing.
Yeah, it feels great.
And
yeah.
Sometimes these journeys we expect them to just take off.
Yeah,
but it takes time and it takes cultivation.
Yeah,
and
it does.
Patience, right?
Yeah. Well, we're building stuff together.
Yes.
We're building together, and I really respect and I'm grateful for all that you guys do, and I'm able to kind of carry along the great reputation that you've created here. To be a part of that is a real honor.
Well, it's mutual, because we feel honored to have you in our stable. Do you have enough?
We're under 20 minutes. I mean.
Okay. Well, I don't like long ones anyways, because I got the Z signs on the
You got Z signs on?
On the Jim Bogle one, we got a comment of just all Z.
Oh boy!
Well,
it's gonna make me paranoid seeing that now.
Well, doing podcasts is a very similar as an artist showing your work, because you get commentary.
Yeah.
You're exposing yourself.
Yeah.
And it's it's an interesting feeling. Yeah. And people don't hold back on their opinions sometimes, and it's just how it goes. Future big projects besides the scene you're maybe working on?
I don't have any big monuments right now. I've done a bunch of big public monuments, and they're really satisfying as far as the presentation and being able to have that out there.
Which is the biggest one you've done?
Well, let's see. I did a 14-foot high monument that's in Tulsa International Airport.
And what was the imagery of?
It's the state bird of Oklahoma.
Oh, right on.
Yeah, the big scissor tails. And we have some scissor tail sculptures here, but it's kind of a big intertwined piece. And it's on this movable base that goes around. It's really cool.
It's like a Lazy Susan? Or?
Yeah, it moves slow enough that you can't really see it moving, but when you look at it, you realize it's in a different position every time you look.
Mm-hmm. I think a sculpture that I really like, we have here on the BlueRainGallery floor, and that's the heron.
Oh, the crane, the central crane. Yes. Yeah.
Those are all over the place. We were towards your place in Durango the other day. And saw them in the fields.
Yeah.
Their migration. But that's a big deal for most people through here.
And New Mexico has a real connection because a lot of them overwinter here. Mm-hmm. Bosque de Apache is a big wintering spot for the sandhill crane, and they're beautiful birds. Birds are probably my favorite subject to sculpt.
Well, you're really good at doing them for sure, especially the emotion you captured in the eagle behind us. I really like that.
Thank you very much.
So, Bryce, you're creating a show for this summer at BlueRainGallery.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the subjects you're working on?
Okay, so a couple, like I said, the sort of loose working title for me is What the Animals Have Taught Me. And one that I'm really excited about has kind of been in my head and in the works for maybe 10 years. But now is the time that it has to happen. Is a pair of terns, of Arctic terns, which are these beautiful birds. They look a little bit like gulls, but not really. They're much more delicate. And so for me, the terns have become a symbol of my children, because Arctic terns fly from one pole to the next pole every year.
All the way around the Earth?
Yeah, so they do a 28,000 mile migration every year. They go from pole to pole. They're following the summer the whole time and feeding. So for me, the terns go to the ends of the earth, which is why that's a symbol for me of my children. I say to my children, I go to the ends of the earth for you. And on a lot of my sculptures, if you look next to my signature, I'll have a couple little stamps, and there's a little wing of a tern that I've been using as a little like cartouche on the sculptures.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so that's one example of some of what the animals have taught me. Another one that I'm going to do, my partner and I, Allison Smith, she's also a painter. We have worked quite a bit with some animal rehabilitation places, like a wildlife rescue, where they'll take injured animals and then get them healthy again and release them back in the wild. And one of the more difficult animals to rehabilitate are owls, and great horned owls in particular. They are so feisty.
Are they?
Yeah, they're really feisty. And so one of the I was talking to the guy who ran the facility it was a place in Arizona outside of Scottsdale. And he said, well, how come no one ever uses great horned owls for falconry? Because they had some birds some falcons and hawks and things like that. He said, an owl would rather die than be your slave. And so I love that. Like, just like you're not beholden to anyone. So I'm going to do a great horned owl and with some sort of feeling around, would rather die than be somebody's slave.
That's interesting. Where I live, there's one of those owls. They're huge.
Yeah, they are.
They're monstrous. And the other night I went out, he was hooing, and I was all, hoo, hoo. And he hooed back, and we had a conversation of hooing. I don't know what we said, but
yeah.
but it was fun. But they're beautiful creatures, and really appreciate your artistry in bringing some of that life into these objects that we get to surround ourselves with, and appreciating the wildlife that we don't pay attention to. It's all around us, but I guess we get too busy.
Yeah.
Until we come to BlueRainGallery, we're like, wow, look at that scene. That's great.
Well, thank you.
Well, we'd like to thank you, Bryce, for showing up today and giving us a good podcast.
Thank you.
I'd like to encourage everybody to subscribe to our many platforms. You can always go to BlueRainGallery.com, go under the blog section and find the podcasts. And also on our YouTube channel and iTunes and Spotify. Thank you.